An oft-repeated warning from afterlife communicators is that those who doggedly reject the possibility of life after death sometimes become what we might consider to be ghosts. Not the open-minded atheists and agnostics who withhold judgment, but those who, despite centuries of evidence, use skepticism or dogmatic beliefs to just say no and deny any possibility. It's a kind of skeptic's wager. He's betting there's no such thing as ghosts. A curious gamble given the possibility that yesterday's skeptics are today's haunters. As the Alanis Morissette song goes, isn't it ironic? If a ghost is defined as the spirit of someone who has died, then we are all potentially ghosts in the making. Yet throughout history, across many cultures, a ghost has meant something more. A soul still entangled with the physical world, drifting through the earth planes, often unaware it has died. A shadowy figure lingering among the living, replaying old memories, sometimes for centuries as we measure time. In Chinese culture, ghosts are called guai, a spirit who cannot or will not move on. It may be that they have strong earthly attachments, unresolved issues, or are distressed or confused, and rather than joining the honored ancestors, they linger, addicted to their earthly existence. In Japan, they are yurei, spirits still tethered to the physical world. In India, it's preta, the restless ones. In ancient Greece, it's idola. In Tibetan Buddhism, preta are hungry ghosts, dissatisfied spirits driven by material cravings, suffering because they still cling to worldly desires and identities. How not to be a hungry ghost? Be aware of the dreamlike state after death that is the bardo. Recognize the dream. Recognize the bardo in order to become liberated from it. That's the theory. In A Doorway to the Light, authors Carmen de Saive, a medium, and Jocelyn Arellano write, "If you believe there is nothing after death, then nothingness is what you will find. A thick mist of sorts that isolates you from both the spiritual and physical worlds." It's important to open our minds now to the idea of the soul's survival in order to be better prepared to enter the astral plane. One deceased communicator told them, "I'm surrounded by a cold fog. I don't understand what's happening to me. I didn't know what death was. I thought everything ended with the disintegration of the physical body, so I was afraid of it. At the same time, I didn't care about what I was leaving behind since I didn't know what would happen after my death. I was very selfish, always thinking only of myself and my desires. Now, in this loneliness, I've had time to think, and I feel so sad when I realize how much harm I caused. I'd been told there would be a punishment, but I don't see that either. I see only this cold fog." During a sitting in Rothesay, Scotland on April 26, 1912, just 2 weeks after the Titanic struck an iceberg and sank in the Atlantic Ocean, taking more than 1,500 passengers with it, a communicator came through identifying himself as William Stead, the prominent journalist and peace activist who was on his way to a peace conference in New York at President Taft's invitation and went down with the ship. Stead had written and spoken widely on his knowing that life continues, and when his time came, he said he was prepared. He explained to a sitter, "When I became conscious, I saw her, the ship. She was surrounded by a bright band of risen spirits, singing the hymn, 'Nearer, my God, to Thee,' and illuminating the surroundings by the radiance of their presence. I saw ministering spirits, glorified spirits, helping the feeble ones whose bodies went down with the vessel, or perished in the numbing waters. They were arousing those brave or terror-stricken who had faced the reality. Many soon realized the great change had come, but the majority are as blind as bats. They cannot help themselves. Pray for them." In No One's Dead, the Jesus Messages, I discuss James E. Paget, a U.S. attorney who claimed to have received thousands of messages from hundreds of deceased communicators during the early 20th century. Paget's wife, Helen, died on February 12, 1914, and within months was communicating with him using automatic writing and providing personal evidence that he couldn't explain by normal means. In December that year, Helen told him that after death she had been met by his mother who assured her that she had nothing to fear. "She was so beautiful that I hardly realized that it was she wrote. She was then joined by Paget's grandmother, whom she described as so beautiful and bright that I scarcely could look at her. So you see," she continued, I was so very fortunate in having your dear parents and grandmother welcome me when I passed over. If they had not received me, I do not know to what condition of fear and distraction I might have been subjected. Helen had been brought up in the Methodist tradition. Her father, Reverend George W. Haida, was a minister for more than 55 years. He died on January 20th, 1913. Her mother, Olivia Whitehill Heidi, died on June 16th, 1905. So by the time Helen passed, her father had been dead for a little over a year, and her mother, 9 years. When Paget asked if she'd met them, she replied, "I first saw my parents after I commenced to believe that I was in the spirit world, and when I saw them they did not know me, but thought that I was still in the body and that they were still on earth, as they had not yet awakened to the fact that they were in the spirit world. They were very unhappy, and it took considerable talking to make them believe that they were spirits and not mortals." We can only speculate as to why Helen's parents hadn't understood that they were dead, particularly since her father was a Christian minister and presumably believed in an afterlife. But if after death he had expected to find himself with God in some kind of heavenly setting, he might have believed he was still at home with his wife, who had been in that dream state for 9 years and, according to Helen, was still wondering why her friends were ignoring her. A number of messages recorded by Paget allegedly came from Robert G. Ingersoll, a prominent U.S. lawyer, politician, orator, and campaigner for agnosticism, who died in 1899. Known as the Great Agnostic, Ingersoll railed against the Church and its rigid dogma. He delivered hundreds of lectures and wrote numerous books and pamphlets. In 1881, in an unpublished lecture titled The Great Infidels, he attacked the Christian doctrine of eternal hell, saying, "All the meanness, all the revenge, all the selfishness, all the cruelty, all the hatred, all the infamy of which the heart of man is capable, grew, blossomed, and bore fruit in this one word, hell." On August 5th, 1915, Ingersoll told Paget that he was enjoying life in the fourth sphere and was still agnostic with regard to the teachings of Jesus and his existence as a historic figure. "I did not deny that there would be a future life," he said. "I merely didn't know anything about it, and hence, all my teachings were directed to making men live on earth in a way that would bring to them happiness while mortals. And my foundation stone, as it were, was love, one towards another. And with this went love, kindness and forgiveness, and good feeling and fair dealing. Especially did I emphasize the necessity for love at home." Ingersoll appears to have had a relatively easy time after death. He was no ghost. He went on to say, "I was not compelled to undergo such suffering when I came into the spirit world or to endure much darkness. But I suppose there were some deeds which I had to pay the penalties for, and hence I had to suffer some. But as my love for all mankind was my principle and feeling when on earth, this love gives me a position which I now enjoy." Although he had his religious detractors, Ingersoll was by most accounts a well-loved and respected figure. He appears to have been one of the good guys. Nevertheless, in the worlds beyond this one, while motive seems very important, we are told that truth ultimately trumps motivation. In Ingersoll's case, his widely followed skepticism meant he had to, or felt he had to, undo the untruths he had previously advocated. In a later message to Paget, he said, "I fully realize the meaning of what a man sows that shall he also reap. But this is my work, and you must know that it is self-imposed. For I see that until I have removed the evils by me taught and engendered, I cannot be so happy and progress as rapidly as I desire. So how not to be a ghost? Keeping an open mind to the possibility of life beyond death seems to be key. Avoid being blind as bats. Avoid being convinced of nothingness. Avoid dogmatic expectations based on religious imagery. Or as the Buddhists say, recognize the dream. Recognize the bardo." Jonathan Beecher is the author of No One's Dead, The Jesus Messages, published by White Crow Books. This article can also be found on Substack.